Hey, everybody, and welcome to How to Make Films and Influence People with Peter and Andrew, where we talk about our own approach to screenwriting and filmmaking. We discuss great works of cinema, and we blasphemously imagine how they could be remade. This week, we'll be talking about The Adventures of Robin Hood and giving an update on our current screenplay, answering a screenplay question from you, the audience. But first of all, I'm Peter, successful filmmaker, film professor, and screenwriter, and this is Andrew.
Screenwriter, filmmaker, but not a firefighter by choice.
And this week, we wanted to update everybody on our screenplay and answer a question from you, the audience. Screenplay continues on. We've been having a really good time, I think, writing, and it's important to have fun while you're going. I think that's one of the nice things about working with a team or working as a team, that it's not just a solitary, lonely pursuit, which is often what writing is, and that's fine. But I've been having a good time just we came up with the outline. We did a lot of thinking before, but now just sort of going through the scenes, seeing them come to life. I've been having a good time with that.
Me too. I'd say it's when you describe it as a solitary, lonely life of of a screenwriter. That doesn't really sell the profession, does it? But some people like solitary and lonely. I think that's okay sometimes, but working as a team definitely adds a new level to this and brings a lot more excitement, I'd say. Just getting fresh ideas, different perspectives. It's more fun.
Yeah, I think, I say it's solitary and lonely just to discourage other people from doing it, so there's less competition for us. But I also think, partly that's what draws people to writing, is that they can do it on their own. But I think also that might scare you off of writing or keep you from continuing with it if it feels too isolated. And I think the idea of working with somebody else is a great alternative or a great option to pursue. So we've been having fun with that. Now, we had a question from the audience, and this is coming in from Sam, who said, a lot of the films that I like the best have really interesting dialogue, like Pulp Fiction or like Aaron Sorkin's movies, but that's not really the way that people talk. How do you find the balance between really fun dialogue and being realistic with your dialogue?
That's a good question.
It's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, and I think, part of that question, and thank you, Sam, for writing in. I think part of that question is already sort of assuming it's not terrible dialogue. I think bad dialogue, you can tell immediately it sounds robotic. It doesn't sound natural. It's too much explaining. It's people not saying things that they would actually say in real life. And so I think as soon as you're out of the really bad dialogue, you're already winning. So that's I think the first thing to think about is, how do you avoid just being really bad? And I think those kinds of things. Would a real person say this? Would somebody in this situation say this? Does it sound, is there any subtext to it, or is everything just on the surface? And I think if you can hit those bases, then you're already winning. And so then you can think about how to make it even better than that. But I think that's the starting point.
Just make sure it's not bad. That's a good starting point. But even like if you had natural dialogue, that doesn't mean it's going to be interesting, because there's lots of conversations you have every day in your life that are very boring. And so I don't know that that's really what you want to necessarily go for either. If you look at, Sorkin or Tarantino, nobody talks like that, but it's very engaging and fun to listen to. And so if you think of it as a movie being entertainment, really at its core, that as long as you're having a good time with it, does it really matter if it's realistic or not? I mean, it depends on the tone of your movie, what the style is. Some movies need that, others don't. And so you kind of have to balance that with what the story is that you're telling. If you're doing like a really deep drama, you don't want, like, Tarantino's over the top language might not work in every situation, but it does work in his style. So I think that would be another thing you'd want to take into account, like the style of the story you're telling, how you're doing it, what your movie's about.
Yeah, great point. I think that style thing doesn't fit, because Sorkin, I think it could be realistic, but it's not how everyday people talk all the time. Quentin Tarantino, that's not how anybody talks, but it's really fun. And I think, so fitting that, the two things that I like to think about are, one is what I think of as reality plus, which is like it's not how you talk in every conversation that you have, but it's like sometimes somebody says something and you have the perfect comeback, or you know just what to say to somebody. It's not unrealistic because you like when you're on your game, you could say that. It's not like every line is a knock knock
Mhm.
joke, but it's like when you're on your game, you think of the right thing to say. That happens in real life, but just in that happens in real life, but just in the movie, that's going to happen all the time. That's sort of like what you're focusing on
Mhm.
in the dialogue. Um, the other thing that I think about is so there's reality plus. The other thing that I think about is like when you're taking a photo of like a friends or family, and you tell them like, okay, pose for the photo. Okay, now everybody, you got to squeeze in because people are standing where like naturally where they would feel like they're standing, and then when they're in front of the picture or when they're in front of the camera, they don't realize that there's all this empty space between them that the camera is now picking up. And so when you're taking that picture, you're like squeeze in, and people end up standing closer to each other than they naturally would. And I think the same thing kind of applies for dialogue, where
Mm.
there are a lot of things that in real life we would have a lot of filler words, filler lines, filler conversation. And in the movie, you just got to squeeze it closer together. Things go faster, you cut out the unnecessary stuff. And that's kind of the sort of the additional thing that I would say differentiates totally realistic dialogue from the best movie dialogue.
It's like if you had a chance to redo conversations in real life. Like on the second turn, you would change it up a little bit. By the 10th time you tried a conversation, it'd be pretty like right to what you're getting at. There wouldn't be a lot of filler words. You would know what the purpose is and you'd get right to it. So it'd be a little quicker too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's reality plus. I like that. That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question, Sam. I think that's something that everybody thinks about as they're writing screenplays or other kind of writing. So thank you. Um, Now, Andrew, let's think about what we've been watching. And you see anything good, anything bad? What's the latest?
We've been catching up with there's a new season of this comedy show called St. Denis Medical. Not sure if you've heard of this one,
I saw
but
the first episode.
oh, did you? Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like it. It's it's by the guy who did Superstore, if you've heard of that one. And that show was pretty good, not the greatest. I feel like this show is like being elevated to a new level, and it might be my favorite comedy on TV right now. It's a workplace comedy, so it takes place at a hospital. But that just taking place at a workplace is always a fun situation. You get people from all sides of life, all ages, all income levels, and so you have that going on. And then it's also the characters are very well written characters that are fun to spend time with, and it's just lighthearted enough that I have like it's a really easy watch. To me, it feels in the vein of like The Office, similar in the style and the tone of that type of a comedy, which has been done before. I mean, when The Office came out, that was revolutionary. I remember the first time I saw an episode of The Office and how it changed my life, and I was like, I can't believe TV can be like this. And now it's like become its own format and structure that other shows follow. And so I feel like this show is doing that, but it's doing it very well, and I am really having a good time watching this.
Great. Yeah, I liked the first episode. I thought it was fun. It's so that's great, and I want to watch more. I never watched Superstore. But I did really like The Office, and I always thought the British Office was totally groundbreaking. I can't believe they're telling a story like this. And then the American Office was in some ways funnier, but a little less like, we're reimagining the form.
Right. Well, and it's only if you saw the British Office first. Like I didn't see it first, so I saw the
Oh,
American Office first, and like I went in blind, having no idea what it was, and yeah, it just blew me away because there hadn't been any shows like that before, and then this comes out, and you're like, oh wow. But it's like thinking about it, you're like, just the whole world of comedy TV has changed since that moment. And so now if you watch The Office, you're like, oh yeah, I get this. Like there's nothing really new or revolutionary about it. But at the time, it was just so groundbreaking. I felt like I just didn't have anything to compare it to. But
Right.
yeah,
Well, it's like if you go back to the 90s and before, everything was like in front of a live audience, and everything was sort of on stage, and you under not people overuse the word laugh track because most of the time it was a live audience laughing. It wasn't just canned laughter, but the idea that people are laughing as the show goes,
right.
that like the idea that people are just performing on this very confined, very set looking set, that was totally normal. And the idea of we're going to break from that and do like a one camera show was crazy. And then the idea of the mockumentary style was
Yeah.
crazy. The idea of talking to the camera. But now it almost seems like the revolutionary idea would be to go back to the
To laugh.
in front of a live studio audience.
I know. Just a show that had that much power and influence over the comedy world for that came out in what, 04, 05? It's been a good 20 years of the world that The Office created, really, in comedy.
Yeah. And it's become so much so that you don't even have to explain. Like Modern Family didn't really,
Yeah.
that was pretty early on, but they didn't even have to explain like what this is as a documentary. It's like The Office kind of had to justify, this is a documentary that we're making about this. But since then it's just like it's totally normal for people to talk to the camera and for the camera to move in a sort of documentary style. It's just, that's normal now.
Right.
I went to see a film, and have you seen this? Begonia by Yorgos Lanthimos. Were we talking about this before? But
We were saying we might want to watch this. I haven't seen it yet. Did you go then?
I did go see it.
You didn't watch
People like it. I really did not enjoy it. I really had a negative response to Begonia. And I mean, in many ways, it's right up my alley. It's a very dark. It's basically a like hostage, like kidnapping thriller with this sort of sci-fi science, like science fiction element to it. But it is. I almost think because it's Yorgos Lanthimos, and I had high expectations of how interesting it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I found it really is just a couple crazy people. Well, one crazy guy and his cousin who has some sort of challenges, and who I'm not sure exactly the cousin's situation, maybe autistic or maybe some other sort of challenges. But it really, I found that very troubling. And I think it's great that the actor who I think identifies as autistic or on the spectrum got a great part in a big movie. I think that's great for him. I found it very troubling that so much of the movie is one person taking advantage of this other person, who doesn't really have the faculties to deal with that. I found that very troubling. And then I felt like the whole idea of the movie was that these guys kidnap this person, and then what are they going to, like, they're trying to get some information from her. They're trying to do this. They have a whole plan that they're trying to do. And I felt like it didn't really rise beyond so many other kind of crime movies like that. Like it didn't seem it sort of had higher aspirations maybe, or it was pitched as being bigger than that. And in some respects, little parts of it do break out of that little mold. But I thought really it was just kind of a crime movie. And then I found it kind of gross and nihilistic. And like, I don't know, maybe if I thought of it as, if I had gone into it thinking of it as like a gritty crime movie, then it would have just delivered on what I was expecting and I would have enjoyed it, because I often do enjoy movies like that.
Yeah.
But I was looking for something a little bit more intellectual, and I thought it was not super intellectual except in a really nihilistic way. And so I didn't enjoy it.
Well, if you're going into a Yorgos movie, you kind of think, I mean, I've only seen a few, but you think he's got a perspective. It's going to be weird in some way. And it's almost like he likes to make you feel uncomfortable. Like that's part of the point of the movie, is for you to just be uncomfortable with him. but I would not think crime movie. I wouldn't have thought that would be the route he would go. It's always some unique premise of some kind that pays off in a really weird way. So if it's like a straight crime movie but done by him, that would be a little jarring, maybe, or confusing to understand. I don't know. He's very interesting.
So I don't want to spoil what happens in the ending, and there are some interesting twists that are kind of, fit with Yorgos Lanthimos, but I actually thought a lot of it was kind of predictable. It was not like like earth shattering, like, whoa, I never saw that coming. And and it was uncomfortable, but I just felt like it was uncomfortable without saying anything very profound. Or it's kind of profound, but on a superficial level. It's like, I mean, and basically the theme of the movie is humanity is terrible. And I'm like, fair enough, but I don't think you're saying anything too like that, that you don't really have a unique twist on that.
That seems to be the theme of most of his movies as well. Maybe that's
Yeah.
what he likes to do, and some of them are going to hit and some of them aren't. I don't know. But yeah, to have that point of view, I always feel like if you're going to have a movie that has that point of view, which kind of a bummer, like a downer story, like you're going to have to like really have something cool, exciting, interesting, like something mind provoking, to make up for it. Unless I'm sure there's a group of people who just love stuff like that. But if there's not like a rewarding ending of some kind, then it's always a tougher watch. I feel like no matter what, how good it is.
Yeah. I do feel like for me, I like gritty movies and violent movies. I like movies like that, but I have a couple. I don't want to say triggers. That sounds a little too, of the time. But there are a couple things that like I find particularly hard to watch, and so a film that other people might have no special problem with, if it has like this issue or that issue, that's going to really turn me off. And I think everyone's like that to some degree with different things. But so there's certain topics where I'm like, ooh, like that hits a little too close to home, and now you've sort of lost me, which
Right.
is not the fault of the filmmaker, but that's my experience.
Yeah, there's just his movies always just make you feel slightly uncomfortable in a way you're not used to. It's like a unique uncomfortableness. You're like, I don't experience this type of being uncomfortable on a regular basis. Maybe that's
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
I would say there's one of the characters is played by Stavros, the comedian Stavros. I forget what his last name is. It's like Stavy, but like he's on all the podcasts and whatnot. And
Hmm.
that's a very unsettling, but really, and I didn't like it, but it's a very interesting and unsettling relationship that he has with the main character or with the Jesse Plemons character. And I thought
Hmm.
that was, again, I didn't that seemed like some good Yorgos Lanthimos of like, oh, that's an interesting twist. Seeing that kind of relationship, uh, the Stabby is just sort of a side character, but it's like, oh, I had never thought about what that relationship would look like. So that was kind of interesting. The Emma Stone character, I mean, I think she does an amazing job, and there's obviously a strong relationship connection between Yorgos and
Yeah.
Emma Stone, but she has a really interesting character, and she does really well. That to me is sort of the most interesting and maybe saving grace. It's not really a saving grace in my eyes because I just don't like the film, but if you're gonna like the film, I think her performance is the brightest part of it.
Yeah. She always is, whatever she does really, really well. So that's going to be a plus no matter what. I
Yeah.
also like the Jesse Plemons. I just think he's a very interesting actor and does creepy very well. I feel like he fits in this Yorgos world. Like he could probably do a lot with those types of movies as well.
Yeah, and I saw him first, as I think many people did, in Friday Night Lights as the like the really just like good-hearted, reliable friend. I think Landry was his
I didn't
name.
make that connection. That's who he was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then he was Todd on Breaking Bad, who's just the coldest blooded killer of them all. And then he was in he had a small part in Civil War where he, I don't know if you saw Civil War, but he's got another pretty creepy role in Civil War. He's an interesting one.
Of Power of the Dog. I think he's in that one, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
weird in that one. Yeah, he's really interesting character actor.
Well, great. So, what is it? St. Denis Medical gets a
Yep.
thumbs up from you, and I think thumbs up is trademarked, so we can't say that. But it gets your endorsement. Begonia, not for me, but I've heard a lot of people like it. I'm not saying they're wrong, but it didn't work for me.
Didn't work for me, but it might work for you. That's what we're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
And we'll be right back after this.
I'm going to tell you something, Peter. Ice cream is good.
And the best ice cream is Dunkin' and Bliss.
And did you know that Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream is now available nationwide?
Wait, nationwide? That's like the whole nation.
Indeed it is.
That means anyone can try their famous flavors like Fat Boy Butterscotch, Fudge the Police, Peach Better Have My Honey, and there's always ice cream in the banana stand.
You know, some people say Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream cures depression. Not Dunkin' and Bliss. They legally can't.
And other people have said Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream made them a better person.
It's certainly done that for you.
Try Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream today. It's not just for fat people.
And we are back.
Let's get into the film of the week. This week we're talking about The Adventures of Robin Hood. Not a recent movie. This is a bit of an older movie. So, Andrew, what can you tell us about this?
1938, The Adventures of Robin Hood, directed by Michael Curtiz, William Cayley. So it says here, excitement, danger, suspense, as this classic adventure story sweeps across the screen. Robin Hood fights nobly for justice against the evil Sir Guy of Gisborne, while striving to win the hand of the beautiful Maid Marian. And I think most people are generally familiar with the Robin Hood story, even if you've never watched any of the movies. I guess it is based on a book, and there's been a lot of movies made about this. But I feel like in this movie, I hadn't seen it before. But going in, you kind of have the idea of Robin Hood is steal from the rich, give to the poor. That's kind of the thing. But this movie's got a lot of like layers to it. There's like some political intrigue. There's like this class warfare going on that I didn't realize was such a central part of this story. There's romance as well, and there's this classic action adventure. And it's kind of surprising how it just does everything. And it's kind of there's a lot of layers to this movie that I wasn't expecting. Did you find how deep this story is to be part of, how engaging it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, those layers that it has. Just what you're saying. I think in many ways, this is the template that all big action movies have followed for the next 90 years. And I think I've got a lot of things to talk about with this, but I think you have these big action sequences, dramatic fights, swashbuckling. I mean, it's big dramatic action sequences, thrills. You have a romance that is enough to sort of feel, you see this connection between Robin Hood and Maid Marian, but it's not a romance movie. It's not a drama about their relationship. That's sort of on the side, but it's important that it's there. And I think that is also part of the template of action movies. And then the music. I think the music is a big part of this. The idea of like we're not just going to watch the action, but the music pumping along with it. And I believe the score is by Korngold, which is that's the last name of the composer. But it's a fun score that I think in many ways is also sort of the template for like an action movie. Obviously, the Fast and the Furious doesn't do a Korngold score, but it's the same idea of like the music is going to pump up the action. Mm-hmm. And I think the banter and quips, the kind of dialogue that's coming out as they're fighting in the middle of the action. I mean, it's just like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or a Fast and the Furious movie, The Rock. You can see this same kind of those kind of rules that I think this is one of the very first movies that set those rules in for what we want from an action movie. And so I think I think it's huge to see in that regard.
It's because I was watching it. I'm like, oh, this is reminding me of this other movie. This happens in this other movie. Like it's like the predecessor to all these great I would kind of call it like an action adventure movie. I was thinking Indiana Jones like took this format and just ran with it because it's very similar structurally, and like the character. If you're looking at like Robin Hood, who is this really confident, kind of a wisecrack. He never gets scared. He never does the wrong thing. So he's very much a superhero arc of a character, right? He's not like changing. He just does the right thing and he's never scared and he stands up for everybody. And he makes fun of people while he does it. Like he's making jokes at the bad guy's expense. And it feels very much in the vein of, Indiana Jones does something like this. I was thinking like Tony Stark in Iron Man. He's a very similar character to that, where it's a very fun character to watch. And you're like, and he does cool things and he's really good at what he does. But it's also kind of slapsticky. Like it's not the really intense action you would get from a straight action movie. It's more fun and slapsticky like Indiana Jones is, where you can kind of have fun scenes, like these fun battles without it having to be too realistic, And I think that balance it makes it really fun to watch. And you can see the fingerprints of that in movies all over the place since then.
Yeah, and I think, compared to Begonia, which I'm not sure anyone's comparing Adventures of Robin Hood to Begonia, but like there's a difference between, like technically there's a lot more people killed in this. Oh, actually, I can't say that. But there are a lot of people killed in Adventures of Robin Hood, but it's not bloody. It's not. No. It's not depressing. It's not gory. And so I think the idea of we want a sort of sanitized action. I remember seeing something about how there's more violence on average in PG-13 movies than R-rated movies, but it's bloodless violence. And so it's like if you look at the amount of people killed versus, in one version or another. And I think because of the rules, I think this was the Hays Code. And so they had certain rules on what they could show. And I think that helped create we're going to have a story with lots of action, and that action is going to be fighting and stabbing and killing, but it's going to be fun and lighthearted.
Yeah, it's that balance that really works for this. Because if you think about like what's actually going on, it's very serious and it could go very dark. Just the fact that these kind of a tyrant took over and they mentioned like chopping ears off. They're like physically abusing these people. They're hanging people. And you don't really see that, and they fight back, and there's no blood, and it's all like the music is very fun, and like everybody's just kind of joking around the whole time, like they're always making light of everything, and so you never really feel like the burden, like the heaviness of what the situation would be if it was played like a realistic action movie these days. Some of them do, and so I think that's what really makes this so fun, is that you can take things that have this depth to it. These stories that have a lot going on and they're very serious, and you can tell a fun action story through it.
Yeah, and I think the pace is also very interesting because it's fast moving. I feel like sometimes you watch older films and they seem very slow, and I think partially that's just that things have gotten faster in more modern times, in more recent times. But I think it's also depends on what kind of movie. And I think some of the dramas from back then would feel slower to us now. And so this, as an action adventure, is faster paced. I also think there's a little bit of a cyclicality of in the 30s and 40s, films were faster paced. And then as you get into the 60s and 70s, people are like, let's slow it down. New Hollywood is going to be about the long takes and, just sitting in the shot. And so it's not that old films are slow. It's that different pace has gone in and out of style. But I would say that this pace totally works with the expectations of a modern audience.
Oh yeah. Like you wouldn't know. Well, and that's the thing about this is, I watch it and we should mention it is in color and it looks really good. My wife walked in when I was watching it, and I was like, when do you think this movie was made? And she didn't know what the movie was. And she's like, maybe the 70s? I'm like, no, it's 1938. Like, it looks really good for when it was made. And the pacing, like you said, it matches what your expectations would be. And so it doesn't feel like a really old movie like you might expect. I think that goes a long way in why this movie holds up even nowadays, and why the structure and the pattern like was copied by other movies. So like, this works. We can do this in a different area or a different story and still have it work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched this movie all the time as a kid, and in my family, my parents sort of, for some reason, I think took their movie parenting guidance from the MPAA and said, like,
Yeah.
when you're 13, you can watch PG-13 movies, and when you're 17, you can watch R-rated movies, but until then, no. But there was this, and I, as somebody who loved films and was interested in things. Oh well, there's this whole loophole, and it's not really a loophole, but I can either watch modern kids movies, or all of the movies made back in the day would be okay to watch by sort of my parents, acceptability rules. And so I watched Errol Flynn was my favorite actor as a kid, which is weird for someone of my age.
Yes, it is.
Because he was making films in the 30s and 40s, but he made so many fun action movies that I was allowed to watch. And so this was one of my absolute favorites.
That is funny that you would say, as a kid, to grow up watching this movie. And like, I just imagining you saying like, oh yeah, I love Errol Flynn, and people being like, who? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you haven't watched this movie? But like, it's very approachable by any age. I feel like this is very family friendly movie that even kids would enjoy, and you don't have to be a weird kid like yourself to enjoy this movie.
I think I told a teacher like in third grade that my favorite actor was Errol Flynn, and she said, "Oh, my mom used to like him." It's like it's
when you knew you were a little different, huh? You're like, well,
a little different. But so I did a little bit of a deep dive into Robin Hood and the story of Robin Hood, and there are a few different things here going on. So one is there was an earlier movie in 1922 called Robin Hood that starred Douglas Fairbanks. And this was one of the absolute biggest movies of all time at that point. It cost like $1 million to make in 1922. I think it was the most expensive movie ever. And it was a huge success. Douglas Fairbanks became like the biggest actor in the world. And Robin Hood was just a huge success. And so this is made then like 15, 16 years later. And to me, that's interesting on the one hand. Just we think that the idea of remaking movies is a new idea. But this was back in the 30s, they were remaking movies from the 20s. And people thought that was blasphemous. And the idea that you're going to remake the biggest movie of all time, that's crazy. And then they changed a lot of things. It's actually a very different story from the original, not from the original, but from the 1922 version, which is a very different version of the Robin Hood story. And there's a famous jousting scene in that 1922 version that's not at all in this Errol Flynn version. And people at the time were like, I can't believe you didn't include the jousting scene. That's such a big part of the movie. And now, the silent and the Douglas Fairbanks 1922 version was a silent film, which makes it a little harder for it to keep up, for a modern audience to want to watch it. But it's, now we don't question why isn't there a jousting scene in The Adventures of Robin Hood. It's just we now accept it. And so that's sort of interesting. When you think of like remaking movies, I don't think it's a bad thing or necessarily a sign of lack of creativity. It's a real question of, are you going to do a good job with it? And I think if you're going to do a good job with it, then go for it. They're good stories that a new audience is going to connect with in a different way than they would have with the older version of the movie.
Well, and for this story in particular, I mean, Robin Hood has been done, I don't even know how many times. There's so many different Robin Hood movies that have come out. And I feel like the most famous one is the Disney animated version of this. But, it's just a story that you can keep producing, keep making, and I'm sure you can put a little twist on it. And I think even going back to the books, there's other side stories that go along with this, that this character is almost like a superhero character, like a Superman, where you just put him in different situations and see what this character would do, and that would be fun. So I think there's a lot you can actually do with this Robin Hood character that creates great stories around it. So I think the idea of this, coming up again and again, that seems, I guess back then it would be crazy, but nowadays it's like, yeah, why not do another Robin Hood? Is it going to be as good as this one? That'd be tough to do, just because of how well this one's done. But yeah.
Yeah. I guess, and I've got more to say about Robin Hood as a story, but on the remake level, back in when I think of, there was a time when like Pearl Jam, this is a tangent, but Pearl Jam came out. They had like a very distinctive sound, and then there were all these bands that were sort of ripping off Pearl Jam, or that's what people said. It's like, oh, that's just a Pearl Jam ripoff, and like people said, Stone Temple Pilots were a Pearl Jam ripoff. They just were copying their sound, and I would say I was a little too young to be having opinions on this at the time, but when I look at it now, I'm like, Stone Temple Pilots were also making great music. Were they influenced in their sound by Pearl Jam? I'm sure. Were they, can you listen to them and say, well, that's the Pearl Jam sound that they're doing? Sure, the songs are good. Now, Candlebox does the Pearl Jam sound, but not well. And so to me, it's not a question. This is a 90s grunge little look at Adventures of Robin Hood, but it's not a question of, is the remake, is it wrong to do a remake, but rather, are you doing that well? Is that new version like worthy of existing? And not that no remake really deserves to exist. It's just a question of, is that new version like contributing to culture? Is that new version doing something fresh and interesting? It's not just absolutely a carbon copy of the original, but it has a new take on it. And I think that's important.
If you have a new take, you need like a new director, a new vision behind it, new perspective on it. Because when you were saying that, I'm thinking of all those Disney live action remakes. You're like, I guess those are kind of remakes, but they're also they're trying to stay like scene for scene almost, and they just don't feel the same as a remake with a different interpretation behind it. That'd be more fun. At least they don't always land. So it really comes down to, is it good or is it not good? And you can do that with any story.
Yeah. I think Ocean's 11 is a great example of remaking a not very good film and turning it into a good film, which doesn't happen as much as, that doesn't happen that often. If the original wasn't that good, people don't think to remake it. But I think that's also a way that it can work.
That's a good point. Take all these movies from the past that didn't really land very well at the time, remake them with a different director, different perspective. It could work. Ocean's 11.
Yeah. Now, Ocean's 8 as a remake of Ocean's 11 didn't love as much. But okay, but here's a little bit of a deep dive into Robin Hood. So Robin Hood, there have been lots of books about Robin Hood, but the original story of Robin Hood just kind of came out of English sort of folklore and minstrels singing and whatnot in like the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s. Around then, you start to get this Robin Hood idea. And then that evolved over time, but there were a few elements of the story of Robin Hood that existed back then, and that's not necessarily what we think of as the Robin Hood story. And so a lot of the things that we think of as the Robin Hood story have been added to it or changed since then. The basic idea was there's a guy named Robin Hood, basically, Robin something. He's in a forest. Where the forest was changed a little, but he's in a forest in England and he robs people. And he's really good at robbing. And that basically is the basic idea of Robin Hood.
Yeah.
And then over time, different things got added to that. But, and this is another sort of interesting thing about like remakes and whatnot, that all kind of sprang up organically, people singing songs, telling stories, whatnot. Probably there was some outlaw that they were basing that on. Uh-huh. And it was in the original version, he was a yeoman, which is like in English feudal society, he's not a poor peasant, but he's also not a noble. So he's sort of like a free man in the middle.
Like a middle class
kind of thing. Then in the 1800s, Sir Walter Scott writes Ivanho, which is a new book that there's also a 1950s movie Ivanhoe that I also watched as a kid because I was allowed to. But Ivanhoe is a totally fictional story, like a new story that Sir Walter Scott created, but it incorporates Robin Hood as a side character. And the idea is that Ivanhoe is this brave knight back in the Middle Ages, and Robin Hood is a side character in that. But a lot of the elements that Sir Walter Scott created for Ivanhoe have then shaped how we look at Robin Hood. And a lot of the idea that there was a divide between the Saxons and the Normans, that is part of English history. That was not part of the original Robin Hood stories, but it became part of Ivanhoe. And then ever since Ivanhoe, which I think was like 1819, early 1800s, ever since then, we've thought of the Saxons and Normans as a big part of the Robin Hood story.
Okay.
And there also was, so there's Robin Hood. Then in like the 1500s, there separately were, like they would just do just different shows and plays and stuff. And there was like a common thing that would go around in English towns was two characters, like there's Punch and Judy, and like the people do sort of different shows. There was Robin and Marian, who were two characters not connected to Robin Hood, but there were two characters named Robin and Marian. And over time, that just got merged into, we have this Robin Hood character, and we also know that Robin and Marian are together. So we're going to start thinking of Robin Hood, and his girlfriend must be Marian. And so that just sort of merged over the years. And then she became part of the story. So anyway, that's a little bit of a deep dive into Robin Hood. It's not necessarily, I don't know what conclusions to draw from that, but it's kind of interesting that the story has evolved, and not all of the things that we think of as being fundamental to the Robin Hood story were in
the original,
were in the earliest days. But now, ever since this Errol Flynn version, this version, The Adventures of Robin Hood, has basically shaped every other version of Robin Hood since.
Yeah, because I was thinking how I know Robin Hood, and I hadn't seen this movie before. I'm vaguely familiar with the Disney one, but I haven't seen really any other Robin Hood movies. But just the idea that everybody just kind of knows what Robin Hood is, who he is. They kind of know the idea of that story, just culturally how it has just made it in everywhere. So that history is kind of interesting to just show how it's been around for, I guess, hundreds of years at this point, just in the culture that this character just kind of lives. It's almost like a Shakespeare character or something that just throughout time, you can just put him into different things. And there must be something that people resonate with the idea behind this guy for him to have just had this staying power of this particular character. Like, he must mean something, like the idea of this guy who's in the middle that can help the inequality or something like that, which I think those themes, I mean, they're definitely relevant today as well. And maybe they've always been relevant. And that's why this character just lasts throughout time and people always relate to him somehow. But it's interesting how this one in particular, just, Robin Hood, we know it. It's always a part of our life,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's something, for many years, people worried about, being robbed by outlaws and whatnot. I mean, people still wouldn't like to be robbed by an outlaw, but I think anytime you were passing through a forest or on a highway, you would have to worry about highwaymen and whatnot. And I think the idea of, who are those outlaws? That would be interesting to people. And the idea of this outlaw is actually a good guy. I mean, that's an interesting idea. And I think that would just be sort of eternally interesting to people. And then I think as that story has evolved, a lot of things have been added into it that then take more resonance with people.
And if the outlaw is a good guy, what does that say about society as a whole? I think that's kind of the thing that really gets you is if Robin Hood's the good guy in this story and he's actively robbing people, that says that the society they live in, the rulership they're under, is so much worse that this is the good option. And so I think that too is such an interesting idea where it's not like you could argue, stealing is wrong. That's the moral side of it. There's a right and a wrong. What he's doing is wrong. But this story is a little more nuanced because it's saying, no, it's okay in certain situations. And I think that is really interesting. That makes you think beyond the black and white, this is right and wrong, to like a morally gray area of when it's appropriate to act out and when it's not. So those themes are a lot deeper than they seem on surface level, but they obviously resonate with people.
Yeah. I think another part of what's interesting about this film is that and I think this comes up in the like Sir Walter Scott version and Ivanhoe, but like Robin Hood is he's not middle class. He's not a peasant. He's actually like a baron, or he's like noble.
Yeah.
He's like Sir Robin of Locksley. And so that is actually a really important part of the movie. And it's important because the way that Guy of Gisborne deals with him in the beginning is different than he deals with the other peasants, because Robin is noble, and so he gets a different level of respect. It means that he can enter the king's court or Prince John's court in a way because he is noble. And so that's interesting on just a plot level, but it's also interesting on like a society level. Like what is the social commentary here? Because I think that there are a lot of different ways that you could tell the Robin Hood story, and you might be inclined to think of it as, robbing from the rich, giving to the poor. That's kind of a Marxist idea, or that's kind of a, revolutionary idea. But this movie is not showing that at all. This movie is saying the good noble is standing up for people against the bad nobles. And in fact, it's all part of a bigger system where King Richard, everything would be fine as long as King Richard can be king again. The only problem is that Prince John is in charge. There's no problem with the system. Like the idea that there are peasants and nobles is not a problem. You just have to be a good noble. And so it's this interesting, like it kind of seems like a revolutionary idea, and the idea could be depicted in other ways in other versions of Robin Hood. But in this film, like Robin is really saying it's this idea of kind of noblesse oblige, like the idea that if you're noble, you have a responsibility to help people under you. And so that means you have a responsibility to be good noble, but you are still going to be superior to those people. Like we're going to enforce the hierarchy, but you need to do it in the right way. And so that's an interesting that's sort of implicit in this. It's not revolutionary. It's just saying there is a good king and he's been replaced by a bad prince. And that's the problem. There's no bigger problem with inequality or anything.
Well, they do mention the Norman versus Saxon thing, and how Marion kind of gets on board with like, oh yeah, just because they're a different, I guess, group of people, that doesn't mean they're worse than us. And so there is that theme that's in there of like people should be treating each other with respect. But you're right about that point with like the hierarchy of social class. They don't really care about that. They're like, no, we still have nobles and they're still peasants, and that's just how it is. But it's right there, they're like, they already talked about Normans versus Saxons, but they didn't talk about rich versus poor. And maybe they didn't want to get into that. Maybe that wasn't a theme that was at the time would have resonated with people in the country either. But it is interesting how, the story kind of wraps up with the real king returning. And that was the whole point, was just to get the king back. And now we're all good again. Like we're happy living under a king. We're happy in this system. It's just we had the wrong king in charge, and now we have the right one. And now everything can go back to normal. And I guess they could have gone a lot of different ways with that. But it is interesting, at the time when this movie was made, that's the way they went. And I guess I didn't really even notice, I didn't think more about it than that in general. It's like, yeah, that seems like a good ending to this movie. Like it does fit with what they set up. But now thinking about it, I'm like, they could have gone other ways with this. And I think a modern movie probably would.
Yeah, and sometimes modern movies go astray by, it's like, oh, in these medieval times, we're going to all learn that democracy is really the right way. It's like, did they though? No, they didn't. They just wanted. That's not how it worked.
No.
But it is interesting. Like, I think this story could be told in a number of different ways, and it's interesting that this version of it, which is sort of, people might not think of it as the most famous version of it. I think in some ways it is the most famous version, but it is the version that I think every other Robin Hood film since has been
It's based
referring back to, whether or not you're familiar with this one. And I think this one sets up Robin is the good noble and there's a good king, and that's the way it should be. And John's problem. It's interesting too that John is like. It's interesting also with the movie that Guy of Gisborne. In this movie, Guy of Gisborne is the bad guy. In other movies, the Sheriff of Nottingham has been the bad guy. Like in the animated version, the Sheriff of Nottingham is the bad guy. Here, he's just kind of a buffoon. And Prince John is kind of he's evil, but it's really Guy of Gisborne that you have to worry about in this one.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, it's an I guess it's interesting to me to compare to like other movies, but like in Star Wars, you have Darth Vader. Darth Vader is kind of the Guy of Gisborne, where he's not actually the big bad guy, but he's the agent of the big bad guy that you are actually worried about. Like, there's technically somebody above him, but that person who's above him you don't deal with directly, really. And so the one who's enforcing the badness is the one who's going to be the bad guy. I think that's an interesting construction. Just thinking of it like on a plot level or on a character level, it's interesting to have the bad guy be somebody who is subordinate to another bad guy, but he's bigger in his badness for the function of the movie.
That's a good point. It makes me wonder how much George Lucas was influenced by this movie. I feel like he must have been, because you have those similarities in Star Wars, Indiana Jones. I feel like it's very much in the same vein of this movie and how it's told and the tone of the movie. That, like the action adventure movie, this is the format for it, and that having a bad guy that you can beat and still there can be a looming threat out there. That's not that bad guy, that there's somebody beyond it, but you don't really deal with them. That's an interesting idea too, that I think we see in a lot of movies, and it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, so then that brings us a little bit to the question of how good is this movie and how great a work of cinema is it? And I don't know how much those filmmakers were specifically influenced by this versus how much this has just sort of trickled down into like every other movie. I do think, I can't think of another film like this from that time period that made as big a splash. And I mean, you think of some of the other giant movies from those, not the earliest years of cinema, but that sort of 30s golden age of Hollywood. There's Snow White, there's Wizard of Oz, but in terms of a big action adventure, I think this might be the one. And so I think everything else kind of after has been absorbing the rules that this set out.
Yeah, it does feel big. And I feel like, so if you're going to, does this movie hold up? Is it still great today? Like, it still holds up for sure. It's a fun movie to watch. You think, if you consider their limitations at the time, the action scenes just aren't going to be as crazy as they can be nowadays or even later on. But what they did with what they had was really amazing. And I think it still holds up as a great action movie. If you were to say, would I rather watch this or Indiana Jones? I'm going to say Indiana Jones, because that, me personally, is one of my favorite movies anyway. But like, that style of movie, I would pick that over this. But I don't think you can knock that against this. Like, this at the time was so big and important and revolutionary. The fact that it still holds up almost 100 years later is quite something, especially considering what the story is. It's not like a drama. Like, they're doing special effects. They have a huge cast. They have the whole set that they had to create for this, that there's a lot going on, and it still holds up. And it clearly influenced the way that movies went forward. Like, there's no denying that this was influential, whether it's openly admitted or not, by so many movies down the line, whether they realize it or not. Very influential movie in cinema history. Yeah,
I really enjoy it. I don't watch it that much these days, but I think it does hold up as a fun watch. I think one thing that has going for it in terms of timelessness is that the big thing that it does is sword fighting, and it does it as well as any movie ever has. And I think the sword fighting is, I think, Princess Bride was just trying to copy this in their big sword fight scenes. I think this is the ultimate sword fighting movie, and there's nothing about modern technology that really makes that easier to do. So I think this holds up in that regard. I think it's fun. I think the pacing's good. I feel like watching it, it seems fun. It doesn't feel like a great work of cinema. It feels like a fun action adventure that is kind of family appropriate. But I think if you take a step back and say how important that is for then the history of film, I think it takes on a bigger significance. Right. So I think that would be my take on it. I think watch it or don't watch it. It's you've seen all the elements here in 100 other movies, but it is valuable to see where it started.
Yes. Just where this all started, I think, is worth something in itself.
All right. So now, if we, like the folks, Michael Curtiz back in the 30s, but now again, this film is going to be remade. If you were to do this as a family film, what would you do?
Well, I think it already is a family film.
This already is a family film. There's also a Disney animated version of this. So
maybe if Robin Hood was a fox, that might be better. I don't know. Because obviously this is a family film. Anybody could watch this. There's nothing about this that would turn any age group away. Disney redid this, animated, also a family film. That works. I was almost thinking, how would you make this a not family film? Just to think, because it's already been done. And I feel like you could very easily go dark with this. If you did the Batman in Dark Knight style, where you make everything dark and serious, all the elements are there that you could really make this an adult movie if you wanted to.
Okay, so you're saying this already is a family. Okay, so what would be the super gritty adult version of this?
Super gritty adult version of this. That's where I was going. And I'm like, I think you could do it. You could definitely do it.
You just lean really heavy into the torture scenes, the Saxons being tortured.
Show the ears being cut off. Show the hangings. A lot more blood. It's very
Robin Hood Marion. It's a lot more nudity and graphic sexual content.
It's all there. You wouldn't have to change much. Just a little more intense.
Yeah, I mean, this one, it's like the work has been done for us on the family version. So, all right, let's move on then to the no budget, which I think it's an interesting question of the no budget version of this. What would you do?
Well, and you said this was a huge budget at the time, right? Like one of the biggest budgeted movies. Was that right?
Yeah. The 1922 version was the biggest at the time, but this one was also a big budget for the 30s. I think it was millions of dollars in the 30s. Yeah. So this was a big budget epic.
It definitely feels like it has a big budget. There's huge sets that they created for this. There's always a big group of people and obviously big name actors. To make this on a low budget, I feel like you'd have to cut so much out to make this small that I don't know how you would do a story this big. Like with the themes of the story and just how it involves different classes, the political part of it, and all the fight scenes, you'd be cutting a lot down to make this, if you were like, I got to get this into one location with a few people. I don't know how you do a Robin Hood unless it's all behind the scenes stuff and it becomes like a strategy type movie where he's like strategizing of what to do. They go out and do it and they come back and you don't really see what they do. That maybe is a way you could get this down and still have a similar story, but I don't think it'd be as interesting. Do you have a way you could do this?
I wish I had a great way to do this. I think my approach would be, okay, I think a lot of elements, as we've established, a lot of elements of the Robin Hood story are sort of take them or leave them. The things that are in this movie are not core to what the Robin Hood story is. And so there's a little bit of a question of, how much do you need to stick to what is in this movie to be a faithful remake of the Robin Hood story. I do think one of the fundamental aspects of Robin Hood is that he's in the forest. He's an outlaw in the forest. And so I think if you set the whole thing just in the forest. So it's one location, or it's, it ends up being slightly different locations, but it's all basically you're shooting in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you condense the time so that there are a few different things that are happening in this. But I think, for instance, if you had, I don't think you could tell this story. Like, I think Good Will Hunting, you could basically tell the same story. You just shoot it on the cheap, over the same kind of time frame, whatever. Here, I don't think you could tell the same kind of story happening in this castle, happening with hundreds of people at the archery match, happening all of that. I don't think you could tell that story with no budget. But I think there would be an interesting approach to some kind of, Robin Hood ambushes a wagon train through the forest, and then there's some kind of standoff, and there's Robin Hood with his men in the forest, the knights coming in, and in the context of that story, maybe Marion is there. Marion is finding out what, if you're doing a condensed time frame, you'd probably want them to have some kind of pre-existing relationship, or there's some kind of way that they're getting to know each other over the course of this condensed time. But I think if you basically are saying Robin Hood is an outlaw in the forest, he's robbing rich people, and the rich, powerful people are wanting to get rid of him. I think this idea that, and this is going back to Begonia, he takes hostages in the forest. It's a kidnapping movie, and it's then going to be Robin Hood fighting it out with Guy of Gisborne coming into the forest after him. But I don't think that would be better necessarily. Maybe we could do it in a better way because we're that good. But I think that you could tell a version of this that would, I feel like if you really stayed in the forest, that would be true to the idea of Robin Hood, because that's such a fundamental part of the Robin Hood stories, that he's an outlaw in the forest. And I think that would be a way of just making the story possible on a smaller budget. Yeah, I haven't done all the outlining of exactly what the story would be, but I think there's something you could do with that.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the TV version of this?
I think you could easily do a TV version of Robin Hood, because we were saying how these stories, there's different versions of this story. And if you were to go back to the original sourcing, I'm sure there's somebody who's compiled all of the different stories they've told throughout the years that have been passed down through just oral history. And you could go all different ways. I was thinking the TV show Sherlock. I don't know if you've seen this one. It had Benedict Cumberbatch in it. It was really well done. But they kind of took this, everybody knows the idea of who Sherlock Holmes is. And they just did these episodes where he kind of does one of the storylines. And there's kind of an overarching story throughout the seasons. I mean, those are hour-and-a-half episodes and only 3 of them. But that idea of just taking this thing that's kind of like a myth at this point and just doing different versions of it. You could even do a modern day like they did in Sherlock. And I think you could have some fun with that, just because this character is a character that people understand. You put him in different situations and see how he gets through it. I would think you could have different takes. You could do it, when it took place in England back in the day. You could do a modern day version of this. And I think you could go crazy with where this ends up while still keeping the core of it feel like Robin Hood.
Yeah, I think you definitely could. I think there have been a couple TV versions of Robin Hood too. I mean, it's just such a big story, such a well-known story. It's not like some of the movies we watch where it only exists within that movie. This is such a story that's out there in the public domain, so it's a little bit different. But I think you could just sort of explore some of those Robin Hood episodes, some of the different stories that are there. I think also, if you wanted to do it in kind of we're going to do this as a 10-part series, as opposed to just an ongoing show, I could see, and if we were tracking to this movie specifically and not the greater Robin Hood story, I could see stretching out the pilot episode being we're getting a sense for what's going on in England. We're getting a sense for the Normans and the Saxons, and Robin is trying as a noble to improve the lot of his people, and that's sort of represented in the movie, like when he comes to Prince John's court, and we sort of expand that over the course of the pilot episode, but we end the pilot episode with Robin having to flee to the woods, that he has tried to fix things as a noble, trying to play within the system, while during the pilot we would also, like, he would be meeting some of the people that he will then work with in the forest. But I think at the end of the pilot, you then get to this point where it becomes clear, if he's going to achieve his bigger goal of helping people and restoring a path for Richard to return, he can only do that as an outlaw. And so Prince John is going to start hunting him. And so we end the pilot with Robin reduced from being this noble who can have a conversation in the court to an outlaw living in the forest. And now we're going to see the different episodes that go into that, and how he's going to have to come back, but now in a disguise. Because the first time he comes to court, he doesn't have to hide who he is. When he comes back to the archery, he has to hide who he is. And I think all of those kind of things. So I think you could absolutely just do the show as lots of different Robin Hood stories, but I think you could also just expand this specific movie's stories into individual episodes and just explore this story over longer periods of time. And maybe give a little bit more, like there's a whole romance between Marion's nurse and Much the Miller's son. It's kind of like, that could be a whole little episode there. There's a whole sequence about Guy of Gisborne. He has a henchman named Dickon who he sends to ambush Robin Hood. And it's like, oh, well, you could have a whole episode about that guy's story. So I think even just within the context of this movie, even if those aren't like even if you're leaving a lot of other Robin Hood stories on the table, and even if some of these are just created for this movie, I think you could just expand this movie into a TV version. I would watch that. I think that would be fun.
There's enough there. There is a lot to
there.
Movie. Yeah.
Would any of these be improvements on the film?
I think this film feels like the heart of what Robin Hood is, and I don't know that you can do that better than this film. But I will say, some of like that, a TV show, I mean, that's intriguing. I feel like that'd be interesting, and I feel like if somebody were to remake this movie with a different style, that could also work and be really good. I don't know that it would be better than what this is, but it could be different and also really good in a different way, unique way.
Yeah. I think for what this movie is, I think what makes this movie a great work of cinema, I don't think any of these other ideas would improve upon that. I think you could tell other fun Robin Hood stories, but I think the idea of this film as a template for action adventure movies ever after, I think you lose that if you do the stripped down version, or you do your super gory adult version, or if you do the TV version. So I think this film is the best version of it. Have you seen any other Robin Hood films?
No, see, that's the thing. I don't know. You've seen other ones, right? Are they do they hold up to this? Do they compare?
There's a lot, but there's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which was a very big movie in the 90s with Kevin Costner. Mm-hmm. There was a Russell Crowe Robin Hood, which really diverged, told a very different Robin Hood story. There's another movie called Robin and Marian, which basically is like Robin and Maid Marian are much older and just living in the woods. I'm not sure exactly what the plot is, but it's basically like we're going to take the Robin Hood story but move 30 years into their future or something.
See, that'd be an interesting idea too.
So
just how does this end?
And there's Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is the comedy version. And I think that none of them are as good as this one. Oh, and there's the Disney animated. The Disney animated I did watch a lot as a kid, and it's got some songs in it. I think it's pretty fun.
One who shows up in Shrek. which is
Yes.
arguably one of the great movies too. So it makes sense. Yeah.
But I think that this is the best version of Robin Hood that I'm aware of, and
you've seen a lot of.
I've seen a fair number.
Some people call you the Robin Hood expert.
They call me the Robin Hood expert. A lot of this I have learned. My deep dive into Robin Hood happened earlier today, so I'm not going to say that I've got a PhD in the subject, but it is a film that I have enjoyed. My Errol Flynn knowledge.
Yes,
I'm not sure too many people of my generation, or even the generation above me, have the Errol Flynn knowledge that I have, or have seen as many of his films. But I'm not sure that's a good thing. He had a dark life.
We don't want to learn more about this guy.
Don't learn more about him. Don't learn more about him. Just enjoy his films.
His first impression of this movie. That's all I need to know.
It's not too many actors in the 20th century spent their younger years working on a slave plantation.
Oh wow, yeah.
By choice.
By choice.
And that's not even the darkest part of his story. I don't know. He's a crazy guy. And there we have it. Thanks for joining us for this episode of How to Make Films That Influence People. Check us out at howtomakefilmspodcast.com, and we'll see you next time.